truly is in Christ alone. Christ alone that we place our trust, we place our hope, and that we place our future. As we continue to worship, we enter into that time where we take a moment to reflect on how much God has given us, the blessings that we have received, and that He calls us to be good stewards of that. And so as we prepare for this morning's offering, let us go to Him in prayer. Dear God, we thank You for the opportunity that we have to give back to You. And Lord, I pray that we will look at all the things that we have, our financial resources, our time, our talents, our energy, our relationships, all of those things that You have blessed us with, and that we will be good stewards of those, and we will use them to make a difference in Your kingdom. Lord, we thank You so much for allowing us and calling us to participate with You to make an impact in the world around us. In Jesus' name we ask it. Amen. All right. Well, I mentioned it just a little bit ago at the beginning, but we are coming up on 4 years. I think September 14th was our of 2014. Yeah, is the math right? Doing math on the fly is never a good thing. But so 4 years, which is really cool, and it's really exciting. And sometimes you think, man, has it been 4 years already? And then sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, it's been 4 years. You know, that's kind of how life is, right? But it is hard to believe that we're at that mark. And I wanted to share, because the next couple weeks we're going to talk about some things that we've talked about before. This is not going to be anything new, but I think as we start a new school year, as we move into our 4th year and into our 5th year, that we continue to talk about, okay, who are we? What are we about? What are we trying to focus on? And so we're going to kind of talk about some of those things that I think are so important. But one, I want to be an encouragement to you. There's lots of statistics out there, and it's kind of challenging to find statistics on church planning and things like that. One of the ones that gets quoted a whole lot is that 80% of church plants fail. And there may be some truth to that. Most say that's probably a little high. It's probably not quite that high of a percentage. A lot of it depends on what's your definition of fail, all this stuff. But one thing is clear is it's not easy, right? It's not easy to start something from nothing. I was reading some others, because sometimes you start wondering, well, are we on track? Are we doing what we're supposed to do? And if y'all don't know by now, I'm not a big numbers person. I never have been. I don't pay much attention to that. But there is some you kind of want to know, well, do most churches? And this was my perspective, is that churches, by the time they're 4 or 5 years old, that churches should be getting close to 200, 250, stuff like that. Because those are the stories you see. Those are the stories you hear. Or you hear the stories where, just church was at 100, and then in 3 years they were at 10,000. You're like, man, how did that happen? Well, there's all kinds of factors, but it's really interesting. The one factor that, and this is a sad commentary, but the factor that makes the most on church growth is your location. Not just of the building, right, but of the community. And if the community starts to explode and you're in a good spot and hit it right, that's how a lot of it happens. That's not the case all the time, but that is kind of interesting to look at. But one thing I found is that most churches, by the time they're 4 or 5 years old, they're just starting to crack the 100 barrier. Church talk, they talk about different barriers of a number of people, and 100 is a barrier. Well, whenever we went to 2 services at Easter, from between Easter and the beginning of summer, we were averaging over 100 people with both of our services. And so I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. And what's interesting, and we always have to kind of look at things in a good perspective or a healthy perspective, is if you compare that to churches in Austin, to some churches, you're going, man, only 100 people? Well, that puts us in the top 25 percentile of sizes of churches in the United States. Most churches are less than 100. And so I'm like, hey, that's kind of cool. Does it really matter? No, it doesn't. Is it going to change the way we do things? No. But it's kind of cool to say, hey, we're doing well. One thing that's a little intimidating, and one of the reasons I want to do this is because churches struggle and they fail if they don't have support at the beginning, in years 1 and 2. If they're not able to, have some outside help, things like that. They found that the next most dangerous time or threatening time to churches is years 4, 5, and 6. Because you've kind of overcome that first little hump, right? And now you're starting to become a church, right? But yet you don't have all of the financial support yet. You're still kind of growing. There's just a lot of factors that can come in. And that's the time that we're entering into now. And one of the key things in this time is you need to really know, okay, who you're going to be and what you're going to be trying to do, right? And one of the things that we're trying to do here at Journey is we're trying to be a simple church. And we try to encourage a simple life in Christ, right? That goes against all of the teaching about how to plant a church, right? Not all of it, but a whole lot of it, right? And so I want to talk about that, and I'm going to bring up a passage that I actually had never really even seen this passage. I'm sure I'd read it, but you know how sometimes you go, oh, I see that passage now. But so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about this commitment to being simple, in a way, commitment to just being ordinary, right? And that does not sell well in our culture today. I understand that. And y'all hear it from me a lot, but I don't think this really gets talked about. Because what has happened in our culture is we have become inspired by movements, and we've become inspired by passion and emotion. Right? That's what moves the needle. That's what gets people engaged. Right? And I've been to a lot of church planting conferences, and guess what? They are all really high energy. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's really cool. We do need that. Emotion is not bad. I'm not saying emotion is bad. But what so many of these conferences do is they say, listen, you have got to get your people fired up. Right? You've got to get them excited. You've got to get them something to focus on, to do. And many churches do all kinds of different things. And they become passionate about different things. In and of themselves, that's not wrong. But you can only go on passion for so long. That will burn out. It doesn't matter who you are. But see, we've done that in the secular world. Right now, I would make the case that we determine who wins an argument by who is the most passionate and who is the most emotional. That is not a good way to make any kind of decisions, right? And we're seeing that in the political life on both sides, right? It's become who's the most passionate. And right now, the loudest voices on the left and on the right are the most passionate and most emotional. And I don't know about you, but everybody kind of feels like life is crazy right now. Why? Because our emotional centers are becoming the dominant voice. And what we've done is we've said, well, you know what? The church we see that and we say, oh, that seems to be working. Look at those people. They're really excited. Man, and I try to be careful of getting political. But I've seen some GoFundMe pages for different individuals from both parties recently who have been indicted on things. And there have been GoFundMe pages set up to support people who are already making well over $100,000 a year, sometimes millions, both parties, mind you. GoFundMe pages to support their legal accounts because they have both done something wrong and they've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is insanity. All right? And that shows you what emotion will do. Right? And I'm getting emotional about it because it's so stupid. It is crazy. But so the church, we see that, we're like, man, if we can get a bunch of idiots to commit $500,000 to get someone out of jail who's done something wrong, surely we can create something in the church to get them to give $500 to us. Right? And that's exactly what we've done. And all of a sudden, we have these, and I'm going to throw out books, and I always get in trouble when I do this. I've read most of these books. There's a lot of great things in them. But there's books that are called Radical, Relentless, Crazy Love. It's a good book. I'm not bashing these books, but do you hear the titles? What are these titles pushing? Right? Passion, Fervent. One of them, a church planting book that everybody will tell you to read, is called The Barbarian Way. Right? And just think of what the emotion that all of this is trying to push, right? And that's exactly what we're seeing. And I want to say, it works in some ways, but is it the way that we really want to go about doing and being the church? And our answer here at Journey is going to be no. The scary thing about that is, will that allow you to survive long term? I don't know. I think it will. But it is counter what the culture is doing. Right? And see, what happens so often is whenever you think of a Christian leader, right? Most of you and me, I think of people who are very charismatic and who are very evangelistic. Right? If we go back to the Bible, in New Testament times, we think of someone like Paul. Like, oh man, look at him, he's so passionate. He just goes and shares his faith no matter what, he gets beat up for it. We move into modern times, and if you're a church historian, you think of names like Spurgeon, and there's a guy named Charles Finney who kind of started some of the emotional movement. And these are controversial figures, but one thing that they were passionate. And they started the kind of the hellfire brimstone, that passionate movement. Then you think of, and just recently who passed away, Billy Graham, right? We think of Billy Graham. All of these guys did some wonderful things. You think today, you think of certain church leaders, you think of Joel Osteen, right? There's a different, the way that he reaches people can be different, right? You know, if you get involved in that, some of the people with the largest congregations, man, I don't know if you've heard of Craig Rochelle. He's Life Church in Oklahoma. I like a lot of his stuff. I heard him speak in a conference it was only about this size. So, I mean, I was right by him. And his intensity and what he expected from his staff, I was like, oh my gosh, I bet people can only work for him for like 30 minutes. Like, I mean, he talked about how he gets up every day and he recites, a mantra, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with this. He recites that, God is going to use you to change the world today. You're going to make an impact today. You're going to do that. And he does that every day, and he does it with his staff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, can we keep this up? And I think there's lots of evidence that we can't, because there's a lot of people that just flame out. And they say, I can't do that. I can't be Billy Graham. I can't be Paul. I'm just trying to find a way to make sure I can pay my mortgage next month. Right? And guess what? That's what 99% of people are doing. And at the same time, they are just as passionately in love with God as these guys who have these big megaphone platforms, right? But yet they're like, I would love just to be able to go and tell people about Jesus, but I've got to get a paycheck. How do we balance that? And sometimes the way, this kind of focus on movements and this passionate focus, what it does is it makes us feel like we are unworthy if we're not meeting that passion, or if we're not meeting that quotient, that we're not bringing people to Christ all the time, or if we're part of a church that isn't growing. It's like, well, maybe, I want to be part of something that's doing something big and changing the world. Hey, that's great. And man, there's a lot of churches that have really gotten sucked into this. And again, both sides of the political aisle, right? We've seen churches that start becoming very social justice warriors. And all of a sudden it looks like, man, that kind of looks like just the talking points of a political party. It's like, is that what we're supposed to do? But it's like, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go end poverty. We're going to solve the illegal immigration issue. We're going to end abortion. Whatever it is, all of those are worthy things that we should engage in. But man, whenever that becomes kind of a driving focus, it only will last so long. And is that the way that God wanted us to do it? Is that the way that Jesus wanted the church to look? I don't know about you, and this is very subjective, and I get it. But I hope that like me, I hope all of you have read through the Gospels or have heard the basic Gospels throughout your life. Most of us probably have. But as I read the Gospels, and I want you to just picture Jesus. Is Jesus someone who was on an emotional, going at 90-mile emotional miles per hour every time that he spoke? No, I don't think so. There is a time that Jesus got emotional whenever he was kicking people out of the sanctuary, out of the temple because of how they were abusing it. Jesus was emotional. There's no doubt about that. But with Jesus, I read the Sermon on the Mount, and I can, in no way can I picture Jesus preaching like Billy Graham, the Sermon on the Mount. Right? You just don't feel that like he's up there saying, you need to change your life now. Come forward now. Right? And Billy Graham did great things. Right? And changed a lot of people's lives. But I don't think that is how Jesus approached things. And even the guy named Paul, who was pretty fiery, and by the way, it got him into trouble sometimes too. Right? But I want to read something that he said. This is in 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, starting in verse 9. Just real quick, back up in verse 3, we don't have this on the screen. It says, it is God's will that you should be sanctified. Right? So this is all kind of in that context. Being sanctified is being set apart. Living your life in a different way. Right? And so getting down to verse 9. Says, now about brotherly love, we do not need to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love each other. Right? So he says, loving each other is the basics. And this church, the Thessalonians, is a good church. They're very mature. They don't have all the problems that you see in Corinth. They're doing a lot of really good stuff. Right? And they're maturing. And so he's saying, I don't need to remind you of that, except that I'm going to remind you. Be loving. Love one another as you are doing, it says in verse 10. And in fact, you do love all brothers throughout Macedonia. Yet we urge you, brothers, to do some more and more. Right? That's their focus. Leading a life set apart is based on loving other people, and just keep doing that. And then he says, make it your ambition. Okay, I want to stop right there. Make it your ambition. If you started that sentence off, make it your ambition. Ambition is one of those words that we use, and sometimes we kind of use it as a negative. Oh, that person has a lot of ambition. Why is it a negative? Because those people sometimes are unhealthily driven, right? Like they go and they do things that most people don't do. right? And the ambition, I use sports as an analogy a lot, but professional athletes, they're a little unhinged, they're a little off, right? Because to do what they do, they dedicate an inordinate amount of time to do that, right? And it's not healthy, right? It's not healthy to living a family life. It's not healthy. And that's fine. They're choosing to do that. And sometimes that's what we connect with ambition, is an unhealthiness. Oh, you're too ambitious. You're wanting too much. You're too passionate about things. So what would Paul, a passionate, fiery guy, is, as he says, make it your ambition. Right? You would think, make it your ambition to go and reach souls for Christ. Make it your ambition to love everyone. Make it your ambition to go and change the world. Right? He says this. He says, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. What? Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. There are not many books written with that as their focus. To mind your own business and to work with your hands just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders and so that you will not be dependent on anybody. Now there's a lot going on here. And of course, anytime we read something, we have to read it and understand the whole of Scripture. Is this saying, mind your own business, so you need to go and find a house up in the hills somewhere so that you never interact with anyone else? No, it's not saying that. Jesus said, go and make disciples. Right? But we don't have to get into everybody's business. Right? In fact, the people that we should be most concerned with is what we're doing. How are we living our lives in a sanctified, set-apart manner? And I love that. Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. Because you know what? That's the only way you're going to make it all the way through. Life is a marathon. If you're going 110 miles an hour, you're going to flame out. And what that means in our Christian walk, in our Christian life, is that what we see with a lot of people is they go for periods of time where they are on fire, right? And they're getting out and they're trying to tell people about Jesus and they're living their life in the way that they should, and then they just get so tired because, you know what, you see, man, the world still isn't changing drastically, right? Because that's the way that we do. We're like, well, what good are we doing? And then all of a sudden, we go from that high, and then we kind of go to the low, where we just check out. Right? And then some people will then get back engaged, and then they check out. Right? Unfortunately, what happens to a lot of people is they get involved in some of these causes and these movements and things like that, and they're really excited, and then whenever they see, you know what, this isn't really fulfilling, this isn't answering any of my questions, and all of a sudden they just turn away and just say, you know what, God must not be for me. I'll go invest my time in this political party or this offshoot. Right? Jesus created us to live a quiet life in Him, a life that was focused on a relationship in Him that we grow in slowly and methodically each and every day. And that our love for other people continues to grow, continues to mature, and that we're not concerned with everyone else's life. Right? That's what it's talking about. We're not concerned with their life. But whenever we have the opportunity through our relationships that God puts in front of us, whenever we have the opportunity to share our faith, we do it. And just what Paul said is live that way so that you earn the respect of others, right? So that people see, man, that person is living a different life. Why is that person able to have joy in the crazy environment that we're in? Why does that person not think the world is a horrible, horrible place? Why does that person see good in the midst of all of this chaos? maybe if we started focusing on trying to live that way, people would start saying, hey, maybe there's something to that. You know, I'm tired of going to all the protests. I'm tired of joining this movement or that movement. Maybe I just want to find some peace. And a quiet life in Christ offers that. And you know, that's going to be at the core of who we are as a church. And the practical side of that is kind of a dangerous one. We're not going to be out loud and shouting our name everywhere and doing all kinds of marketing and ploys to get people to come here. Right? What we want to do is we want to encourage each other to live a quiet life in Christ that sets an example for others to see. And so when you have the opportunity to invite someone to come and worship and be part of Journey, I hope you take that advantage of that. Right? But that's not your sole mission in life. Your mission in life is to live a quiet life in Him. And then allow Him to start bringing opportunities to you, and He will. You just have to be patient, and you have to pay attention when they arrive. Living a life that is quiet, that is ordinary, is okay. And guess what? I think it's even biblical. But it is a powerful way to live your life. Because whenever you do that, you will be noticed by other people. And then you need to be ready to be able to share the love of Christ with them. Whenever you earn their respect, and they start asking the questions, why do you live that way? And then we have the opportunity to share. Live a quiet life. Live an ordinary life. But it is a life that I would say is more passionate towards Christ than any other. Let's go to the Lnving prayer.